Hi, I'm Michelle Fakos, an internationally renowned and award-winning expert on Scandinavian art. I've been lecturing and writing on this topic for decades, and I'm both an American and a Swedish citizen living part-time in Stockholm. Excited to share with you my research gleaned from books, journals, letters, and conversations with other experts. I know how hard it is to find out about Nordic art because I had to learn to read Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, and German to do it. Are you with me? Let's get started. Today, I'll talk about National Romanticism, one of several cultural movements popular throughout Europe in the second half of the 19th century. The 19th century was an era of nation building, both politically and metaphorically. The transformation began suddenly in 1772, when Danish, the language spoken primarily by peasants living in the Kingdom of Denmark, replaced German, which had been the official written and spoken language for more than a century. There was a saying that Danish aristocrats spoke German to each other, French to their mistresses, and Danish to their peasants. The triggering event was the Struensee affair. Johann Friedrich Struensee, a German medical doctor from Hamburg, distinguished himself by successfully treating the schizophrenia of the Danish king. In 1772, Struensee was executed for treason. His crime was not the fact that he fell in love and produced a daughter with the lonely young queen, an English princess of German extraction, but that he used his position to influence King Christian VII to enact democratizing reforms opposed by the nobility. Aristocrats, who due to a world economy in transition had increasing difficulty affording their luxurious lifestyles. Still, they were determined to maintain their historical privilege, including exemption from taxes and criminal prosecution. They conspired with the king's stepmother to convict the well-meaning Struensee of treason. He was first beheaded and then drawn and quartered. The unfaithful queen was sent back to her German residence, the ducal palace in Celle. Christian then became a puppet ruler until his death in 1808, with the nobility forming an alliance with his stepmother, the Dowager Queen, to eliminate German influence from the bureaucracy, schools, and universities. In order to protect the nation from foreign control, they promoted a generic concept of Danish national identity through archaeology, art, botany, literature, and theater, now performed exclusively in Danish. Around the same time, Johann Gottfried von Herder in Germany wrote Treatise on the Origin of Language, in which he defined a nation as a social collective that shares common customs, values, territory, and most importantly, language. German, like French, was read by all European intellectuals, so his ideas spread like wildfire, especially in the wake of French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte's attempt to build a Roman-style empire by conquering Central and Eastern Europe. His project failed, of course, with his 1815 defeat by Allied forces at the Battle of Waterloo, delivering the final blow. Had the more than 300 independent German states been united, they might have successfully defended themselves against Napoleon's attacks instead of being easily subjugated. Inspired by Herder, Germans spent the 19th century negotiating a generic German identity, uniting for the first time in 1871. In the meantime, the struggle for national sovereignty in Europe, inspired by the American and French revolutions, led to the formation of new nations. Greece and Belgium in 1830, Italy in 1861, and Bulgaria in 1878. The non-German speaking populations living in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Czech, Hungarian, and Polish, also clamored for independence, which finally came with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. But even sovereign nations like England, France, Denmark, and Sweden competed for national superiority in culture and technology. They showcased their greatest achievements at World's Fairs beginning in the 1850s and began to define their own national identities. It was an urgent matter of national harmony and national security. After all, in unity there is strength. These nation-building projects enlisted artists, architects, musicians, writers, geologists, archaeologists, and linguists, and was promoted in books and newspapers read by increasingly literate populations. National identity was reinforced by national education systems and compulsory schooling, which was first instituted by Denmark in 1814. By the end of the 19th century, national identities formed essential components of identities both individual and collective. The dizzying social transformations wrought by the Industrial Revolution generated fear, insecurity, and poverty that bureaucrats and intellectuals began to combat with new appreciation for native culture, tradition, and nature. Initiatives like Know Your Country, a campaign launched in Sweden at the end of the 19th century, combined with the Lutheran premise that the best way to come closer to the Creator was to study their creation, reinforced nation-building projects in Scandinavia. Artists numbered among those citizens privileged enough to travel. They honed their skills at prestigious art academies located in Dusseldorf, Munich, and Paris. Their travels enabled them to better identify their nation's singularities based on a comparison with their experiences abroad. For Finns and Norwegians, both of whom had been governed by foreign powers for centuries, national identity was weaponized in their struggle for sovereignty. Finland from Russia, and Norway from Sweden. Driven by the traumatic Struensee affair, Denmark was the first to begin formulating a generic national identity. Inspired by the 17th century's scientific revolution, Denmark was also the first to study its national territory and history. Another factor was geography. The Danish populace was separated by yawning and difficultly traversed expanses of land and water. The government considered it essential to build common ground that unified diverse regions, that included farmers as well as fishermen. They worked hard to formulate a national identity that transcended the economic and cultural disparities of social class. It was also in the 18th century that the Danes invented hygge, happiness experienced as an absence of fear, a feeling generated by a sense of security and control over one's life. Danish bureaucrats also learned that happy citizens were more productive than unhappy ones, a discovery that subsequently guided many governmental decisions. Finland and Norway were the most rugged, remote, impoverished, and sparsely populated among Nordic lands. Finland was a dense wilderness of lakes and forests, while high mountains and a jagged coastline distinguished Norway. Neither had much history to uncover because they were controlled by other nations, they were sparsely populated, and they didn't industrialize significantly until the 20th century. Neither had a state-sponsored academy for training artists, as did Sweden and Denmark. Linguistically and culturally distinct from their neighbors and occupiers, independence-seeking artists and intellectuals in Finland and Norway focused on landscape, on handicraft and tradition, to forge common ground among their citizens. In Norway and Sweden, this was facilitated by the institution in 1842 of 7 years of compulsory schooling for citizens that were already, at least in a rudimentary sense, literate. Thanks to the state Lutheran religion, by 1750, Scandinavia enjoyed a very high literacy rate. This was a consequence of Martin Luther's emphasis on the importance of individuals reading the Word of God, the Bible, for themselves, rather than relying on the interpretations of Latin reading priests, as was the case in Roman Catholic countries. This empowerment was enforced by a law requiring parish priests to conduct literacy tests annually on all parishioners. Heads of households were responsible for ensuring the literacy of family members and servants. In Sweden and Norway, these record books still exist and are important resources today for those tracing their ancestry. Because of their dependent status, Finland and Norway weaponized national romanticism as part of their struggle for sovereignty. They imagined themselves more authentic than their rulers, having lived in a biomystical and symbiotic relationship with nature that had survived unbroken, they assumed, since prehistoric times, and that differentiated them from their more civilized Danish, Swedish, and Russian masters. What might otherwise be perceived as inferiority in this context enabled a sense of moral superiority. In this painting by Norwegian painter Christian Skredsvig, a boy plays a willow flute. This may not appear remarkable until you understand that willow flutes can only be made from willow trees growing at high latitudes. Furthermore, willow branches are only sufficiently supple to carve for 1 month in the springtime. They can only be played for a few short months before they dry out. Thus, for Scandinavians, willow flutes signal spring and the coming of the long days of summer, and also were a reminder of the importance of appreciating and taking advantage of the gifts nature bestows at the proper moment. It reinforces the truth that nature is more powerful than humans, and that if we learn its rhythms, it provides great beauty and inspiration for creativity and happiness, a lesson that carries over into human relations as well. Organizations formed to preserve artisanal skills in indigenous art, architecture, and musical traditions, with contemporary composers like the Norwegian Edvard Grieg and the Finn John Sibelius evoking folk songs in their modern compositions. Around the same time, a Viking-inspired dragon style in architecture and design emerged in Norway. In addition, painters and poets returned to their childhood homes, the places to which they were emotionally attached. They celebrated the beauty and singularity of those often rural places. In all 4 countries, this emphasis on the authentic, natural, and traditional, along with Enlightenment ideas about the inherent equality of individuals, regardless of race, religion, or gender, helped to shape political ideas and create fertile ground for the growth of social democracy, a strong social safety net, and the sense of security and well-being of hygge that dominate these countries today. The national romantic movement unfolded differently and for diverse reasons in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. How, you might wonder? Check out my other national romantic videos. And if you enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you'd like to keep current with new videos and support this project, please subscribe to my channel below. Leave comments and questions in the section below and check out my website, www.michellefakos.com, for related articles, books, lectures, and blog posts. What would you like to learn about Scandinavian art?